The morning sun was just starting to warm up the streets when Trevor Banks pulled into the parking lot of Premium Auto Repairs. He was running early, which was unusual for him, but he wanted to make sure everything looked perfect. After all, he'd only been the manager here for 3 weeks, and he was determined to prove he deserved this promotion. Trevor had worked his way up in the auto repair industry for 10 years, moving from shop to shop, always climbing higher. This was his first time managing a premium location, and he had big plans. He looked around the gleaming showroom with satisfaction. The floors were spotless, the waiting area had leather couches, and there was even a coffee bar with fancy espresso machines. This wasn't just any repair shop. This was the kind of place that served important people with expensive cars. He straightened his tie and checked his reflection in the glass door. Trevor believed he knew exactly what success looked like, and he was going to bring it to this location no matter what it took. Meanwhile, about 40 miles away, Diane Mitchell was sitting in her hotel room, going through emails on her laptop. She'd been on the road for 2 weeks, visiting different premium auto repairs locations across the state. As the CEO and founder of the company, she made it a point to show up unannounced at her shops at least once a quarter. It kept everyone honest, she figured, and it helped her stay connected to what was really happening on the ground. Diane had started Premium Auto Repairs 15 years ago with nothing but a small garage, a toolbox, and a dream. She remembered those early days clearly. The banks that wouldn't give her a loan, the suppliers who didn't take her seriously, the customers who asked to speak to the real mechanic when they saw a black woman holding a wrench. She'd faced it all and pushed through it all. Now she owned 47 locations across the country. But success hadn't changed who she was at her core. She still loved working on cars with her own hands. She still drove her pride and joy, a 1970 Dodge Challenger that she'd restored herself years ago. That car represented everything she believed in. It wasn't the newest or the flashiest, but it was solid, reliable, and built to last, just like her business. Diane glanced at her watch. The downtown location was only 30 minutes away. She hadn't visited that shop in about 6 months, and she'd noticed some concerning trends in the monthly reports. Customer satisfaction scores were dropping. Revenue was down. Something wasn't right, and she wanted to see it for herself. She grabbed her keys, pulled on her favorite old sweatshirt and a comfortable pair of jeans, and headed out. When you owned a company, you could dress however you wanted. Besides, she'd learned long ago that showing up in casual clothes told her more about a location than arriving in a business suit ever could. The Challenger rumbled to life, and Diane smiled. This car never failed to make her feel alive. She merged onto the highway, enjoying the drive. The weather was perfect, and she found herself looking forward to getting her hands dirty again. Maybe she'd even help out in the service bay for a few hours. That always reminded her why she loved this business in the first place. An hour later, Diane pulled up to the Premium Auto Repairs downtown location. The building looked good from the outside. Clean, professional, well-maintained. She drove around to the service entrance and pulled into one of the bays. Trevor was standing near the front desk when he heard the rumble of an older car engine. He looked up and frowned. The service bays were supposed to be for scheduled appointments only. He walked out to see who had just pulled in without checking in first. What he saw made him frown even deeper. An old Dodge Challenger, probably from the 70s, with a few small dents and faded paint in spots. Behind the wheel sat a black woman in casual clothes looking around the shop with interest. Trevor felt his jaw tighten. This was exactly the kind of situation he'd been trying to avoid. He'd spent the last 3 weeks carefully managing which customers came through these doors. Premium Auto Repairs was supposed to be an upscale establishment, and he believed that meant attracting the right kind of clientele. People with money, people with new luxury cars, people who fit the image he was trying to build. He walked over to the Challenger, his face already set in a polite but dismissive expression. Before Diane could even fully step out of her car, he was talking. "Can I help you?" Trevor asked, his tone making it clear he didn't really want to help at all. Diane smiled warmly. "Yes, I'd like to get an oil change and a tire rotation, please." Trevor barely glanced at the car. "I'm sorry, but we're completely booked today. We don't really have any openings." Diane looked around the service bay. There were only 2 other cars being worked on, and she could see at least 4 empty bays. "Really? It looks like you have plenty of space." Trevor's smile became even more strained. Our schedule is reserved for our established customers. This is a premium service center. We handle high-end vehicles mainly. This is a high-end vehicle, Diane said calmly, patting the hood of her Challenger. It's a classic. What I mean is, Trevor continued, clearly uncomfortable, we focus on newer models, luxury brands. Our technicians specialize in modern computer systems and advanced diagnostics. Your car is, well, it's older. You might be better served at one of the shops across town. There's a place called Mike's Garage that handles classic cars and older models. They're more suited to what you need. Diane studied him for a moment. She'd heard every version of this speech before, back when she was just starting out, but hearing it in her own shop from her own employee made her stomach turn. I see, she said quietly. And what if I'm willing to pay your premium prices? Trevor shook his head. It's not about the money. It's about maintaining our brand standards. We have a certain image to uphold. I'm sure you understand. Inside the shop, Robert Chen was working under the hood of a Mercedes. He was one of the senior mechanics, and he'd been with Premium Auto Repairs for 8 years. He knew good work when he saw it, and he knew good people when he met them. He also knew exactly who was standing in the service bay talking to Trevor right now. Robert had been at the company anniversary party last year. He'd shaken Diane Mitchell's hand and thanked her personally for creating a workplace where skill mattered more than anything else. She'd told him that people like him were the backbone of the company. Now he watched in disbelief as Trevor dismissed her like she was nobody. He glanced at his coworker, Lisa Rodriguez, who was checking brake pads on another car. She'd seen it too. They exchanged a worried look but kept working. They'd both been watching Trevor operate for 3 weeks now, and they'd seen this pattern before. This wasn't the first time he'd turned someone away for reasons that had nothing to do with the schedule. Back outside, Diane made a decision. She wasn't going to reveal who she was just yet. She wanted to see how far this would go. All right, she said. I understand. But would it be okay if I sat in your waiting area for a bit? I need to make some phone calls before I drive across town. Trevor hesitated, but he couldn't really refuse that request. Sure, I guess that's fine. Diane parked her Challenger in a visitor spot and walked into the waiting area. She settled onto one of the leather couches and pulled out her phone, but she wasn't making calls. She was watching, and what she was about to see would change everything. Part 2. Patterns Revealed. 1,400 words. Diane sat in the waiting area with her phone in her hand, but her eyes were focused on everything happening around her. The shop was busy, but not as busy as Trevor had claimed. She could see the service bays clearly from where she sat, and there was definitely room for more cars. The question was, why had he lied to her? She didn't have to wait long for the answer. About 20 minutes later, a young Latino man pulled up in a Honda Civic. It wasn't a new car, maybe 7 or 8 years old, but it was clean and well-maintained. The man walked into the shop and approached Trevor at the front desk. Hi, I'd like to schedule an oil change and maybe get my brakes checked, the young man said politely. Trevor barely looked up from his computer. We're booked solid for the next 2 weeks. You'll need to try somewhere else. 2 weeks? The man asked, surprised. I can see you have empty bays right now. Can't you fit me in? Trevor's expression hardened. Those bays are reserved for appointments. Like I said, we're completely booked. There's a Jiffy Lube about 3 miles down the road. They do walk-ins. The young man stood there for a moment, confused and clearly frustrated, then turned and left. Diane watched the whole interaction, her jaw tightening. She pulled out a small notebook from her bag and wrote down the time and what she'd witnessed. 30 minutes later, another customer arrived. This time it was a black woman in her 30s driving a brand new Mercedes SUV. The car probably cost more than most people made in a year. Diane sat up straighter, curious to see how Trevor would handle this one. The woman walked in confidently. Hello, I'm having some trouble with my navigation system. It keeps freezing. Can someone take a look at it today? Trevor glanced at the Mercedes through the window, and Diane saw something flicker across his face. The car was expensive, premium, exactly the kind of vehicle he'd said they specialized in. But the woman driving it clearly made him uncomfortable. I'm sorry, Trevor said slowly, but our diagnostic systems are down today. We're not able to run any computer diagnostics until tomorrow afternoon at the earliest. The woman frowned. Really? What about a simple check? Maybe it's just a loose connection or something. It could be, but without our diagnostic equipment, we can't properly assess the issue. I wouldn't want to charge you for work we can't complete properly. The Mercedes dealership across town would be better equipped to handle this. The woman sighed, clearly annoyed. Fine, I'll take it there. She left, and Diane added another note to her notebook. Then, not 15 minutes later, an older white man pulled up in a Toyota Camry. The car was at least 10 years old, with visible rust spots on the bumper. Diane watched as Trevor's entire demeanor changed. Good morning, sir. Welcome to Premium Auto Repairs. How can we help you today? Trevor's smile was genuine this time, warm and welcoming. I need an oil change and I think something's wrong with my transmission. It's been making a funny noise, the man explained. Absolutely, we can take care of that right away. Let me get one of our best technicians on it. It should only take about an hour for the oil change, and we'll do a full diagnostic on that transmission at no extra charge. Can I get you some coffee while you wait? Diane couldn't believe what she was seeing. The man's car was older than hers, definitely not high-end by any measure, yet Trevor was treating him like royalty. She didn't need to wonder why. The pattern was crystal clear now. She watched as 2 more customers came in over the next hour. A white woman in a modest Subaru was welcomed warmly and told they could fit her in right away. A black man in a Lexus was told there were no available appointments for the next 10 days. Robert Chen had been watching too. He'd seen enough. During his lunch break, he walked over to where Diane was sitting. He recognized her immediately, even though she was dressed casually. You don't forget the face of the person who gave you your dream job. Ms. Mitchell, he said quietly, glancing around to make sure Trevor wasn't nearby. I'm so sorry about what happened earlier. Diane looked up at him and smiled slightly. Robert, right? You've been with us for a while now. 8 years, he confirmed, sitting down beside her. And I've never been more embarrassed to work here than I have been these past 3 weeks. Tell me what's been going on, Diane said, her voice calm, but her eyes sharp. Robert took a deep breath. It started the day Trevor took over as manager. He called a staff meeting and told us he was going to elevate the brand. He said we needed to be more selective about our customers, focus on the right demographic. At first, we thought he just meant we should upsell services or focus on customer retention. But then we started noticing the pattern. What pattern? Diane asked, even though she already knew. He turns away Black and Latino customers, sometimes Asian customers too. It doesn't matter what kind of car they drive or how much money they're willing to spend. He always has an excuse. We're too busy. The diagnostic system is down. We don't handle that type of car. We're booked for weeks. But then white customers come in and suddenly we have all the time and resources in the world. Diane felt anger rising in her chest, but she kept her voice steady. Have any customers complained? Robert nodded. A lot of them. But here's the thing. He pulled out his phone and opened up a folder. Trevor never forwards the complaints to corporate. He tells customers to file them online, but then he intercepts them. He has access to the local complaint system, and he just deletes them or marks them as resolved without ever actually addressing them. How do you know this? Because Lisa, one of our other mechanics, got suspicious. She helped a customer file a complaint right here in the shop one day. The customer used the tablet at the front desk. Lisa watched Trevor delete it 10 minutes later. After that, we started keeping our own records. Robert showed Diane his phone. There were screenshots of complaints, photos of customers who'd been turned away, even a few video clips taken discreetly. One video showed Trevor literally telling a black customer that this establishment isn't the right fit for everyone. Diane scrolled through everything, her expression growing darker with each piece of evidence. How many employees know about this? Pretty much everyone. The mechanics, the front desk staff, even the kid who cleans the waiting area. We've all seen it. Some people spoke up at first, but Trevor made it clear that anyone who had a problem with his management style could find work elsewhere. He said he was hired to turn this place around and increase profits, and corporate would back him up. Corporate would back him up? Diane repeated, her voice dangerous. Robert looked uncomfortable. That's what he told us. He said the regional director specifically chose him because he knows how to run a profitable shop, and that we should stay in our lane and just do the work we're assigned. Diane stood up, and Robert could see the controlled fury in her eyes. Robert, I need you to do something for me. In about 10 minutes, I want you to gather every single employee in the main office. Everyone who's working today. Can you do that without Trevor knowing why? Robert nodded. Yes, ma'am. I can tell them it's a safety meeting or something. Perfect. And Robert, thank you for keeping those records. What you did took courage. As Robert walked away, Diane sat back down and pulled out her tablet. She logged into the company's internal system and started pulling up records for the downtown location. What she found made her stomach turn. In the 3 weeks since Trevor had taken over, customer satisfaction scores had dropped from 92% to 68%. The number of service appointments was down 30%. Online reviews had plummeted. There were 14 formal complaints filed through the external system, all from minority customers, all describing similar experiences of being turned away or treated poorly. But what really caught her attention was the financial data. Despite Trevor's claims about increasing profits, revenue was actually down 28%. The shop was losing money because they were literally turning away paying customers based on skin color. Diane closed her tablet and stood up. It was time to end this. She walked toward the front desk where Trevor was typing something on his computer, probably another excuse to turn someone away. He didn't even notice her approaching until she was standing right in front of him. "Excuse me," Diane said calmly. "I'd like to speak with the owner of this business." Trevor looked up annoyed. "Ma'am, I already told you we can't service your vehicle today." "I'm not asking about my vehicle. I'm asking to speak with the owner." Trevor laughed, actually laughed. "The owner doesn't deal with walk-in complaints. If you have an issue with how things are run here, you can file a complaint online." "I see," Diane said. "And what's your name?" "Trevor Banks. I'm the manager here." "Well, Trevor Banks," Diane said, reaching into her pocket. "Let me introduce myself properly." She placed her business card on the desk in front of him. Trevor glanced at it, then did a double take. His face went from annoyed to confused to absolutely pale in the span of about 3 seconds. The card read, "Diane Mitchell, CEO and founder, Premium Auto Repairs." "I think," Diane said quietly, "we need to have a conversation in your office. Right now, Part 3, the confrontation, 1,400 words." Trevor's hand trembled slightly as he picked up the business card. He read it 3 times as if reading it again would somehow change what it said. His mind raced, trying to process what was happening. The woman he'd dismissed, the woman he'd treated like she didn't belong here, was the owner of the entire company. I didn't know," Trevor stammered, his confident demeanor crumbling. "That much is obvious," Diane said, her voice calm but carrying an edge that made Trevor's stomach drop. "The office, now, and have someone call all the staff in for a meeting." "All of them? But we have cars in service, we can't just—" "Now, Trevor." The tone of her voice left no room for argument. Trevor nodded and quickly sent out a message to the staff. Within 5 minutes, everyone was gathered in the main office. The mechanics, the front desk staff, the detailers, even the young guy who handled the car wash. They all crowded in, looking confused and worried. Most of them had seen Diane come in earlier, and word had spread quickly about who she really was. Diane stood at the front of the room, her arms crossed. She looked at each person, making eye contact, letting them know she saw them. Then her eyes landed on Trevor, who was standing off to the side, looking like he wanted to disappear. "Good afternoon, everyone," Diane began. "For those who don't know me, my name is Diane Mitchell. I founded Premium Auto Repairs 15 years ago, and I currently serve as CEO. I'm here today because I've noticed some concerning trends in this location's performance, and I wanted to see what was happening with my own eyes." She paused, letting her words sink in. "What I found was worse than I imagined. This morning I arrived at this shop as a regular customer. I was driving my personal vehicle, dressed casually, and I requested a simple oil change. I was turned away. I was told this shop doesn't service my type of car, that it doesn't fit your brand standards, and that I should take my business elsewhere." A few people in the room glanced at Trevor, whose face had turned red. Lisa Rodriguez, one of the mechanics, raised her hand slightly. "Ms. Mitchell, if I may, what we witnessed today isn't an isolated incident." Diane nodded. "I know. I stayed in the waiting area for over 2 hours, and I watched. I saw customers being turned away repeatedly. I saw discrimination happening right in front of me, in a business that I built specifically to be different from all the shops that discriminated against me when I was starting out." She pulled out her tablet and turned it toward the group. "Let me share some numbers with you. 3 weeks ago, this location had a customer satisfaction rating of 92%. Today it's at 68%. Service appointments are down 30%. Revenue has dropped 28%. Online reviews have gone from an average of 4.8 stars to 3.2 stars. The room was dead silent. Everyone was listening intently. Now, Trevor, Diane said, turning to face him directly, would you like to explain to everyone here what your management strategy has been for the past 3 weeks? Trevor's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I was trying to improve the business, to make it more profitable. By turning away paying customers. By being selective, Trevor said, his voice getting defensive. By focusing on the right demographic, the kind of customers who can afford premium services and who fit the brand image. And what exactly is the right demographic? Diane asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Trevor seemed to realize he was digging himself into a hole, but he couldn't stop. Customers with newer vehicles, luxury cars, people who look like they can afford our services. People who look like they can afford our services, Diane repeated slowly. And how exactly does someone who can afford services look, Trevor? The silence in the room was suffocating. Trevor knew anything he said would sound bad, so he said nothing. Diane pulled up something on her tablet. Let me tell you what I witnessed today. A young man with a Honda Civic was turned away. You told him you were booked for 2 weeks. 20 minutes later, a man with a 10-year-old Toyota Camry with rust spots was welcomed warmly and served immediately. She scrolled to another note. A woman with a brand-new Mercedes SUV worth about $80,000 was told your diagnostic equipment was broken. 40 minutes later, a woman with a Subaru was offered a full diagnostic check for free. Trevor tried to interrupt, but Diane held up her hand. I'm not finished. A man with a Lexus was told you had no appointments for 10 days. The very next customer, driving an older car worth a fraction of that Lexus, was told you could fit him in right away. Would you like to know what all the turned-away customers had in common, Trevor? Trevor's shoulders slumped. He knew what she was going to say. They were all people of color, every single one. And all the customers you welcomed? They were white. Every single one. Diane's voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of deep disappointment. You weren't managing this shop, Trevor. You were running a discrimination operation. Robert Chen stepped forward. Ms. Mitchell, if I may add something. Many of us tried to push back against what was happening, but Trevor told us that this was corporate policy. He said the regional director specifically hired him to implement these changes and that anyone who disagreed could be replaced. Diane's eyebrows shot up. He told you what? He said corporate wanted a more upscale image and that we needed to be gatekeepers for the brand. Lisa added. Some of us started documenting what was happening because we knew it was wrong, but we were worried about losing our jobs. Diane turned back to Trevor, her expression a mix of anger and disbelief. So not only were you discriminating against customers, but you were lying to my employees using the company's name to justify your prejudice. I wasn't lying, Trevor said, his voice rising in desperation. My previous employer operated this way. It's a legitimate business strategy. You attract high-end clients by maintaining an exclusive atmosphere. That's just how the industry works. That's how some parts of the industry work, Diane shot back. The parts that end up in court defending discrimination lawsuits. The parts that I specifically built my company to be different from. She stepped closer to Trevor. Let me tell you a story. 20 years ago, I was a young mechanic trying to get a job. I went to shop after shop, and you know what happened? Most of them wouldn't even let me fill out an application. I was told I didn't fit the image. I was told customers wouldn't feel comfortable. I was told maybe I should try cleaning offices instead. Her voice grew stronger. When I finally got hired, I had to work twice as hard as everyone else just to be taken half as seriously. I had customers who would literally ask for a different mechanic when they saw I was a black woman. I had suppliers who talked down to me. I had people who assumed I was the receptionist, not the person who was going to fix their car. The room was completely still. Even Trevor had stopped trying to make excuses. I built premium auto repairs on one simple principle, Diane continued. Everyone deserves excellent service. It doesn't matter what you look like, what you drive, how you're dressed, or how much money you have. If you need your car fixed, we fix it well. That's it. That's the whole business model. And somehow you took that simple, decent principle and threw it in the trash. Trevor finally found his voice again. Look, I'm sorry if I offended you, but I was just trying to do my job. I have 10 years of management experience. I've turned struggling shops around before. I know what works. What works? Diane pulled up another screen on her tablet. In 3 weeks, you've received 14 formal complaints. You've lost longtime customers, You've damaged this shop's reputation so badly that it's going to take months to rebuild trust. You've created a hostile environment for both customers and employees. You've lied about company policy, and you've exposed this business to potential legal action. Tell me, Trevor, what part of that works? Trevor had no answer. He looked around the room hoping someone might defend him, but everyone avoided his eyes. They'd all seen what he'd done. They'd all known it was wrong. Diane took a deep breath. Trevor Banks, your employment with Premium Auto Repairs is terminated, effective immediately. The words hung in the air. Trevor's face went through several expressions: shock, anger, and finally a kind of desperate panic. You can't fire me, he said. I have a contract. I have rights. You have a contract that includes a clause about upholding company values and maintaining professional conduct, Diane replied. You've violated both. You'll receive your final paycheck, but you will not receive the performance bonus you were expecting. Security will escort you out, and you have 15 minutes to collect your personal belongings. This is ridiculous, Trevor said, his voice rising. I'm going to fight this. I'm going to sue. Diane met his eyes steadily. You're welcome to try. But I should tell you that we've been documenting everything. Every complaint, every turned-away customer, every discriminatory action. And depending on what our full investigation reveals, we may be the ones pursuing legal action against you for the damage you've caused to this business. She pressed a button on her phone, and 2 security guards appeared at the door. Part 4, Accountability and Consequences, 1,400 words. Trevor stood frozen for a moment, looking between Diane and the security guards like he couldn't quite believe this was happening. The reality of the situation was finally hitting him. His face shifted from red to pale and his hands clenched at his sides. This is a mistake, he said, his voice shaking. You're making a huge mistake. Do you know how hard it is to find good management? I increased efficiency here. I streamlined operations. You destroyed trust, Diane said simply. And trust is the foundation of any good business. As the security guards moved toward Trevor, Diane held up her hand. Wait, before you go, Trevor, I want to make sure you understand something. I want everyone in this room to understand something. She turned to address the entire staff again. Premium Auto Repairs exists because I was tired of being treated like I didn't matter. When I was coming up in this industry, I faced discrimination every single day. People judged me before I even picked up a wrench. They made assumptions about what I could or couldn't do based on how I looked. Her voice grew more passionate. I promised myself that if I ever had the chance to build something, it would be different. It would be a place where we judged people on their character, their needs, and their business, not on their skin color or appearance. That promise is why this company exists. It's why all of you have jobs, and it's not negotiable. She looked directly at Trevor. You came into my business and turned it into exactly the kind of place I spent years fighting against. You used fear and lies to manipulate my employees. You hurt people who were just trying to get their cars fixed. And you did it all while claiming it was good business. Trevor tried one more time to defend himself. Look, I understand you're upset, but this is how the real world works. My last job, we had the same policies. We focused on high-value customers. We maintained standards. It wasn't personal, it was just business. It wasn't personal? Diane's voice rose slightly for the first time. Every person you turned away, that was personal to them. The young man in the Honda who needed his brakes checked and you sent him away? What if those brakes failed and he got in an accident? Personal? The woman in the Mercedes who you dismissed? She probably went home and told her family and friends never to come here. Personal? The customers who drove away feeling less than, feeling unwelcome, feeling judged? All of that was deeply personal. She took a breath and steadied herself. And let me tell you something else about your business strategy. It doesn't even work. You lost nearly 30% of this shop's revenue in 3 weeks. You know why? Because word spreads. People talk. They leave reviews. They tell their friends and family. When you treat people badly, it doesn't stay secret. It becomes known. And then nobody wants to do business with you. Lisa spoke up from the back of the room. Ms. Mitchell, if I may, Trevor also told us that customer complaints didn't matter as much as profit margins. He said if we could turn the bays faster with fewer customers, we'd make more money. That's insane, Diane said, shaking her head. Our profit doesn't come from rushing through fewer jobs. It comes from building relationships, from repeat customers, from word of mouth, from being the shop that people trust enough to recommend to their mother, their sister, their best friend. You can't build that with discrimination and exclusion. Robert stepped forward. We have something else to show you, Ms. Mitchell. He pulled out his phone and showed her a folder full of screenshots and photos. Those complaints Trevor deleted, we saved them. All of them. We knew what he was doing was wrong and we wanted proof. Diane took the phone and scrolled through the evidence. Her expression grew darker with each image. There were messages from customers describing how they'd been treated, screenshots of deleted complaints, even a few video clips that the staff had discreetly recorded of Trevor turning people away with flimsy excuses. One video in particular stood out. It showed Trevor telling a black customer, "This establishment caters to a certain clientele, and I'm not sure it's the right fit for you." The customer had asked what he meant, and Trevor had responded, "I think you'd be more comfortable at a shop that's less upscale." Diane looked up from the phone, her jaw tight. How many people saw this happening and didn't say anything? Most of us tried, Robert said quietly. But Trevor made it clear that anyone who questioned his decisions would be written up or fired. He said he had the authority to restructure the team however he saw fit. He told me I was too soft, Lisa added. When I tried to help a customer he'd turned away, he called me into the office and said I was undermining his authority. He wrote me up for insubordination. Diane made a note on her tablet. That write-up is removed from your record as of right now. In fact, I want to personally thank you for trying to do the right thing even when it was difficult. She turned back to Trevor. You not only discriminated against customers, but you created a culture of fear among my employees. You punished people for trying to do their jobs with integrity. Do you understand how serious that is? Trevor's defiance was crumbling. He could see that everyone in the room was against him, that the evidence was overwhelming and that he had no way out. I was just doing what I thought was best for the business, he mumbled. No, Diane said firmly. You were doing what was easiest for your prejudices. There's a difference. She pulled up another document on her tablet. Here's what's going to happen. You're fired, effective immediately. You'll receive your base pay through today, but the $3,000 performance bonus you were expecting, that's gone. Instead, that money is going to be divided among the employees who had the courage to document your behavior and try to protect our customers. Trevor's eyes widened. You can't do that. That's my money. Read your contract, Diane said coldly. Performance bonuses are contingent on meeting company standards and values. You failed spectacularly at both. The money will be better spent rewarding people who actually tried to uphold what this company stands for. She continued. Additionally, we'll be conducting a full investigation into your tenure here. We'll be reaching out to every customer who filed a complaint, every customer who left a negative review, and every person who stopped doing business with us over the past 3 weeks. We're going to make this right. And if our investigation reveals that you violated any laws, which I suspect it will, we reserve the right to pursue legal action. Discrimination isn't just bad business, Trevor. In many cases, it's illegal. Trevor looked like he might be sick. This is going to destroy my career. You destroyed your own career, Diane said without sympathy. You had an opportunity to manage a successful shop, to lead a good team, to serve a diverse community. Instead, you chose to discriminate. Those are consequences of your choices, not mine. The security guard stepped forward again. This time Trevor didn't argue. He walked to his small office to collect his things, supervised by security to make sure he didn't take any company property or delete any files. While he was gone, Diane addressed the remaining staff. I know the last 3 weeks have been difficult for all of you. I'm sorry you had to work in an environment where your values were challenged and your integrity was questioned. That should never happen, and I take responsibility for not catching this sooner. She looked around the room. I'm going to be personally overseeing this location for the next few weeks while we find the right permanent manager. And I want to make something very clear. If you ever see discrimination happening again, you have a direct line to me. My personal email will be posted in the break room. You will never be punished for doing the right thing. Robert raised his hand. Ms. Mitchell, who's going to manage the shop in the meantime? Diane smiled slightly. Well, that's the other thing I wanted to address. Robert Chen. How would you feel about being interim manager? Robert's eyes widened. Me? But I'm just a mechanic. You're not just anything, Diane corrected. You're someone who has been with this company for 8 years. You know our values. You had the courage to document wrongdoing even when it was risky. You care about doing the right thing. Those are the qualities I need in a manager. Robert looked overwhelmed but pleased. I'd be honored. Good, we'll make it official tomorrow. You'll get a pay increase and we'll get you enrolled in our management training program. If you do well, the position could become permanent. The other employees started clapping. Robert had been well-liked and respected, and everyone seemed relieved that someone from within their own team would be taking over. Trevor emerged from his office with a small box of personal items. His face was still pale and he wouldn't make eye contact with anyone. The security guards escorted him through the shop and out to his car. Everyone watched in silence as he drove away. Once he was gone, the tension in the room seemed to lift slightly. Part 5. Rebuilding and Resolution. 1,400 words. After Trevor left, Diane took off her jacket and rolled up her sleeves. The staff looked at her curiously, not sure what was happening next. "All right, everyone," she said with a slight smile. "We have customers waiting, and we have a reputation to rebuild. Let's get to work. And for today, I'm not the CEO. I'm just another mechanic on the floor." Over the next few hours, something remarkable happened. Diane worked right alongside her employees, getting her hands dirty, talking with customers, and showing everyone that she wasn't just someone who sat in an office making decisions. She was someone who understood the work from the ground up. When a customer came in nervous about a strange noise in their engine, Diane was the one who listened carefully, took the car into the bay and diagnosed a loose belt. She explained the problem in simple terms, fixed it quickly, and charged a fair price. The customer left happy and relieved. At the end of that first day, Diane gathered everyone for a quick meeting. "Tomorrow we start making things right. Robert, I need you to pull up every complaint we've received in the last 3 weeks. Every single one. We're going to reach out to each of those customers personally." Robert nodded. "I already have them compiled. There are about 32 people we should contact." "Good. I'll be making those calls myself," Diane said. "I want them to hear directly from me that what happened was unacceptable and that we're committed to doing better." Lisa raised her hand. "What should we say if customers come in and ask about Trevor? People are going to wonder what happened." "Tell them the truth," Diane replied. "We had a manager who wasn't upholding our company values and he's no longer with us. We're committed to serving every customer with respect and excellence. That's it, simple and honest." Over the following days, Diane made good on her promise. She personally called every customer who had been turned away or treated poorly. Some were angry. Some were hurt. Some had already decided never to come back. But Diane listened to each one, apologized sincerely, and offered to make things right. One call in particular stood out. It was with a man named David who had brought his daughter's car in for service. Trevor had turned him away, saying they didn't work on those types of vehicles. The car was an older Honda that David had helped his daughter buy when she started college. "I felt so embarrassed," David told Diane over the phone. "My daughter saved up for months to buy that car. It's not fancy, but it's hers and she takes good care of it. When that manager looked at me like I'd walked into the wrong place, like we didn't belong there, it hurt." "I'm so sorry," Diane said, and she meant it. "That should never have happened. Your daughter's car deserves the same quality service as any vehicle that comes through our doors. Would you be willing to give us another chance? I'd like to personally service your daughter's car, no charge, and I promise you'll be treated with the respect you deserve." There was a pause. Then David said, "You're really the owner, founder and CEO, and I started out as a mechanic, which is what I'll be doing when you bring that car in." David did come back and he brought his daughter with him. Diane spent an hour going over the car, doing a complete checkup, changing the oil, rotating the tires, and even fixing a small issue with the brake lights that David hadn't mentioned. She showed his daughter how to check her own oil and gave her some tips on maintaining the car. When they left, David shook Diane's hand. "Thank you. This is what service should feel like." Stories like that started spreading. Customers who had been turned away came back. They told their friends. They posted positive reviews online, often mentioning that the CEO herself had called to apologize. The shop's reputation began to shift from the damage Trevor had caused. But Diane knew that phone calls and apologies weren't enough. She needed to make systematic changes to prevent this from ever happening again. She implemented a new company-wide policy. Every location would have mandatory quarterly training on inclusion, bias, and customer service. Every manager would be evaluated not just on profits but on customer satisfaction scores. employee feedback, and adherence to company values. And most importantly, she created an anonymous hotline where employees could report discrimination or unethical behavior directly to the corporate office, bypassing local management entirely. "I should have had this in place years ago," Diane admitted to Robert during one of their morning meetings. "I built this company on good values, but I didn't build enough safeguards to protect those values." Robert, who was thriving as the interim manager, nodded thoughtfully. "You know what's interesting? Since Trevor left, our numbers have actually improved. We're busier than we've been in months." He pulled up the data on the computer. In just 2 weeks, service appointments were up 40%. Customer satisfaction scores had jumped back up to 89% and were still climbing. New customers were coming in specifically because they'd heard about how the company handled the situation. "People want to do business with companies that have integrity," Robert said. "When word got out that you personally fired a discriminatory manager and took action to fix the problem, people noticed." Diane smiled. "That's the thing Trevor never understood. Doing the right thing isn't just morally correct. It's actually good business. When you treat people well, they come back. They bring their families. They recommend you to their friends. You build something sustainable." 3 weeks after Trevor's firing, Diane made Robert's position as manager permanent. He'd proven himself to be exactly what the shop needed: someone who cared about the work, valued every customer, and led with integrity. The downtown location became busier than it had ever been. The waiting area was often full, and the service bays were constantly active. But it wasn't just about the numbers. It was about the atmosphere. Customers of all backgrounds came through the doors and were greeted warmly. A Latino family bringing in their minivan got the same excellent service as a business executive with a luxury sedan. A young black woman with an old pickup truck was treated with the same respect as an elderly white man with a brand new car. One afternoon, about a month after everything happened, something special occurred. Diane was in the bay working on a brake job when a young girl, maybe 12 or 13 years old, walked over with her father. The girl was staring at Diane with wide eyes. "Are you really the owner?" the girl asked shyly. Diane wiped her hands on a rag and smiled. "I am. My name's Diane. What's yours?" "I'm Ashley," the girl said. "My dad told me you built this whole company yourself." "Is that true?" "It is. Started with one small garage and a lot of determination." Ashley's eyes lit up. "I want to do something like that someday. My school counselor says girls shouldn't take auto shop, but I love working on cars. I help my dad fix things all the time." Diane felt her heart swell. She reached into her pocket and pulled out one of her business cards. She wrote her personal email on the back and handed it to Ashley. "You hold on to this," Diane said, "and don't let anyone tell you what you can or can't do. If you love working on cars, then you work on cars. If you want to build a business, you build a business. The only person who gets to decide what you're capable of is you." Ashley clutched the card like it was made of gold. "Thank you. I'm going to keep this forever." As Ashley and her father left, Robert walked over to Diane. "That was a nice moment. That girl reminded me of myself at that age," Diane said softly. "Except I didn't have anyone telling me it was possible. I had to figure it out on my own, push through all the people who said I couldn't do it. And now you're that person for her," Robert pointed out. "You're the proof that it's possible." Diane looked around the shop. The bays were full of cars being serviced with care. The staff was working together smoothly, chatting and laughing between jobs. Customers in the waiting area were relaxed and comfortable. This was what she'd always envisioned when she started the company. "You know what the best part is?" Diane said to Robert. "We're not just fixing cars here. We're building trust. We're creating opportunities. We're showing people that businesses can be successful while still treating everyone with dignity." Robert nodded. Trevor thought success meant being exclusive. He didn't realize that real success means being excellent for everyone. That evening, as Diane prepared to head back to her hotel, she took one last walk through the shop. She ran her hand along one of the workbenches, feeling the cool metal, smelling the familiar scent of motor oil and tire rubber. This was where she belonged. Not just in a corporate office looking at spreadsheets, but here, where the real work happened. Her phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from the regional director, praising the turnaround at the downtown location and asking if she'd be willing to share her strategies with other locations. Diane smiled and made a mental note to respond tomorrow. As she walked to her challenger, she thought about Trevor. She didn't hate him even after everything. She felt sorry for him. He'd spent his whole career believing that success meant keeping people out, when the real secret to success was letting everyone in. Diane started her car and pulled out of the parking lot. In her rearview mirror, she could see the Premium Auto Repairs sign glowing in the evening light. 15 years ago, this had been just a dream. Now it was 47 locations strong, employing hundreds of people, serving thousands of customers every week. And it worked not because it was exclusive, but because it was inclusive. Not because it kept people out, but because it welcomed everyone in. That was the real secret. That was what Trevor had never understood. Diane drove into the evening, already thinking about her next location visit. There was always more work to do, more people to serve, more trust to build. But tonight she felt good about what had happened. She'd stood up for her values, protected her employees, and fought for her customers. That was worth more than any profit margin. That was what real success looked like. And somewhere out there, a young girl named Ashley was holding a business card and dreaming about what she could build someday, because she'd seen that it was possible. She'd seen that someone who looked like her had done it. That, Diane thought as she drove home, was the most important thing of all. Not just building a business, but building a future where more people could dream bigger dreams. And that future started with making sure everyone felt welcome. Everyone felt valued and everyone got a fair chance. That was the promise Diane had made 15 years ago. And it was the promise she would keep fighting for every single day.